Welcome, my friends. This is William M. Briggs, the statistician of the stars, and today I want to talk to you about a very important subject, climate change. Now, you've heard a lot of dire climate predictions, so let's just review some of them. Newsweek, for instance, reported that the weather was, of course, changing dramatically, and that this was going to lead to a drastic change in food production, and that climatologists were almost unanimous that it would reduce agricultural productivity. And they said if the climate is profound as some pessimists fear, the resulting famines could be catastrophic. They reported on the National Academy of Sciences. They said that climate change would force economics and social adjustments all over the world. Well, they said that you've heard these kind of things before, but climatologists were then pessimistic that political leaders would take any action whatsoever, and that the longer they delay, the worse it is. Time magazine also has similar type of predictions. They said there would be a global climate upheaval, and that the trends show no sign of reversing. And they said things like the climate Cassandras are becoming increasingly apprehensive, and that there were telltale signs everywhere, catastrophic global food shortages, and the resulting famines that would take place from these. A climatologist named Kenneth Hare, he was former president of the Royal Meteorological Society. He said that he had a grim premonition of what was going to happen. He said, "I don't believe," this is a quote from him, "I don't believe that the world's present population is sustainable," he said, "if trends continue." And the New York Times, of course, has similar types of forecasts reporting on these types of predictions. That they say that scientists are firmly convinced that the climate is changing. And the National Academy of Science issued a report. They said that our present climate, they said, was highly abnormal, and that these results were that this was the result of our activity. And they quote themselves, very prominent scientists like a guy named George Kukla from the Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Observatory. He said that a trend in cooling will continue for the next 4,000 years. Cooling, not warming, because that story was from 1975. The New York Times story was from 1975. The Time and Newsweek articles were also from the mid-1970s. The New York Times in 1975, they said 1972 was a year of freak weather throughout much of the world, and that the winter was exceptionally cold the world over. And that experts then, they said, the recent drop in temperatures that was noticed was comparable, they said, to the return of the Little Ice Age that existed from about 1430 to 1850. And they promised that a full-fledged, their words, ice age would soon be upon us. The guy from the Royal Meteorological Society, Hare, he said that 51 years ago, I guess it was now, he warned of catastrophic global cooling. And that sunshine was reaching the earth was at lower levels than ever. Now, you might have heard of Paul Ehrlich and his population bomb. He, in 1967, predicted that there would be a famine by 1975, and it was already too late to stop it. Hundreds of millions were going to die, at least tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, billions even. Climate change was big in the 1970s and frightening, just as frightening as it is now. Leonard Nimoy, Spock, in 1978, hosted an episode of In Search of, very popular show back then, Climate Change. And he warned that climate experts believed that the next ice age was on its way.
If we are unprepared for the next advance, the result could be hunger and death on a scale unprecedented in all of history.
Temperatures had been dropping for 30 years, he said, and it was true. They were. Since the 1940s, temperatures were dropping on a global average. And he said, according to some climatologists, we may be living in the next ice age. Clifford Miller, I should say, he's a glaciologist from the University of Colorado. Then he said that for the last 3,000 years, summer temperatures had been getting colder. Not warmer, colder. Other experts said the same. Global cooling was coming. The only problem, of course, for these scientists was that the weather did not cooperate with the theories. Global cooling became, in the 1980s, mid to late 1980s, global warming, the new theory of climate change, and based on the same foundational the same foundational cause, which is burning of fossil fuels. And global cooling, fossil fuels were going to produce a lot of particulate matter in the air, which would block the sun's rays, plunging us into an ice age. And global warming, burning of fossil fuels would lead to more carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide would trap outgoing heat, long wave heat, and we would be not plunged, but cast into a fiery lake of fire. So they warned, from the 1980s and into the 1990s, the UN said that because of global warming, the glaciers would melt. And in the 1970s, they said the glaciers would build up and continue to build. In the 1980s, 90s, they said they would shrink and even disappear. And of course, all that melting water flows into the sea, and the sea levels would rise. And they said that entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth if, in 1990, if the trend was not reversed. We had only, they warned, a 10-year window of opportunity before the greenhouse effect goes beyond human control. Well, it's been 35 years. So they were a bit off. None of it happened or show any sign it was happening. Now, the Pentagon in 2004 wrote a secret report, what to look for about global conflicts and so forth, and it was leaked or found its way into the hands of a Guardian reporter, the Guardian, a newspaper in the UK. The Pentagon warned of climate change over the next 20 years. All right, we've already exceeded that. It's been 21 years. They said it would be a global catastrophe, costing millions of lives in wars and natural disasters. They said major European cities will be sunk beneath the seas. Britain itself, Great Britain, would be plunged into a Siberian climate, nuclear conflict, mega droughts, famine, and widespread conflict throughout the world. They warned of a tipping point that was going to be crossed in that 20 years. That, of course, never came. Now there's been many more dire predictions. In 2014, for instance, the United Nations predicted disaster if global warming wasn't checked. The Arctic was predicted to be ice-free many times since then, and of course it isn't. And ice is even regrowing there. It goes on and on. The big question is, how do these theories come about? How do these prognostications happen? And why are they believed in the face of all of this serial error? For these are errors, of course. They make many predictions that don't come true. And we want to understand. We want to understand why scientists still devote much thought and effort towards these theories, even in the face of this falsification, what we might call a falsification. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to explore. Of course, it's not all bad. Some models are good, and we're going to explore that next time. And I hope you come back to listen to that. Thanks very much for listening.